Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really plunging headfirst into ASML Holding NV, just ASML.
Right.
We've got this great investment committee analysis, and we're going to try and, pull out the key stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission, like always, is to cut through all the noise, the complexity, and figure out why ASML is just so critical today.
It really is a linchpin company.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we'll unpack what they do, why they're so dominant, how the management runs things.
There's finances too, right?
Oh, yeah. The financial strength, and then the big opportunities, and of course the risks.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't just, a company profile. It feels like it's about the foundation of everything digital.
It pretty much is the bedrock, like you said.
Okay, so let's start right there. At its core, what does ASML actually do? How do they make their money?
Well, fundamentally, ASML, they design and build these incredibly sophisticated machines.
Photolithography systems.
Photolithography. Oh. Think of them like giant, hyper-advanced projectors. They print these unbelievably tiny, intricate circuit patterns onto silicon wafers.
So they're printing the blueprints for chips, essentially.
Exactly. And it's not optional. You absolutely need this step to make pretty much any modern microchip.
Non-negotiable.
Absolutely. And their money comes from basically two main streams, and they work together.
Okay.
First is system sales. Selling the actual machines. You've got the DUV, deep ultraviolet machines. Those are kind of the workhorses used for a lot of different chips.
Mostly the standard stuff.
Yeah. And then you have the EUV, extreme ultraviolet systems. These are the absolute cutting edge ones. You need them for the most advanced chips being made today.
The ones driving AI and stuff?
Precisely. And the economics are wild. High prices, but they don't sell that many units. Like in 2024, maybe 44 EUV systems and 374 DUVs.
Only 44 EUVs.
Yeah, but get this.
Yeah.
Back in 2022, just 345 new machines brought in over 15 billion euros. And the price difference is huge. DUV, maybe tens of millions of euros.
Yeah.
An EUV machine, that's north of 150 million euros.
150 million.
Uh-huh. And the next generation, the high-NA EUV ones, they're talking over 370 million euros per machine.
Good grief. Okay, so that's pillar one. What's the second?
The second pillar is installed base management, or IBM. This is huge for them. It's stable, it's growing, high margins. Think of it like the classic razor and blades model.
Ah, right. Sell the expensive razor, make money on the blades.
Exactly. They sell the machine, and then for years, even decades, they make recurring revenue from servicing it, software upgrades, maintenance. In 2024, that was over 6.4 billion euros.
Just from servicing.
Yeah, and what's amazing is almost every machine they've ever shipped, it's still running somewhere in a customer's factory, their fab.
Really? Still going after all that time?
Yeah, it creates this incredibly long tail of revenue, like an annuity, for 20, maybe 30 years or more. It's a fantastic, predictable business line.
So, okay, this is super complex tech, huge price tags, but why should someone like me, just using my phone or laptop, care so much? Why is printing on silicon basically guaranteed to be needed for decades?
Because it all boils down to humanity's endless appetite for more computing power.
Can't get enough.
Never.
Yeah.
We always want things faster, smaller, more powerful, using less energy.
Yeah, definitely.
And that means continuing Moore's law or something like it, packing more and more transistors onto chips. To do that, you have to etch smaller and smaller patterns. And right now, at the absolute cutting edge, ASML's EUV technology is the only way we know how to do that reliably at scale.
The only way. Nobody else can do it.
Not at the leading edge for high-volume manufacturing, no. And think about all the big trends. AI everywhere, self-driving cars, massive data centers for cloud computing, the Internet of Things.
All need faster, better chips.
Exactly. All depend on these advanced chips. So
right.
ASML's value proposition is actually profoundly simple when you boil it down. They make the printing presses for the digital age. And the demand for what those presses print is structurally growing, and ASML is the only one selling the most advanced presses.
Yeah.
That core job, it's almost certain to be needed for the next 10, 20 years, probably longer.
You hear the term economic moat thrown around a lot, especially in investing.
Mm-hmm.
But ASML, it sounds like they have something else entirely, like a technological fortress. How did they build something seemingly so impenetrable? Is it really that different?
That's a really good question, because it is different. It's not just one thing. It's this powerful combination of deep intangible assets know-how, basically, and incredibly high switching costs for their customers. Morningstar calls it a wide moat, and that feels right.
Okay, so intangibles.
Yeah.
More than just patents.
Oh, much more. Yeah, they have over 20,000 active patents, but the real moat is the decades of accumulated knowledge, the specific processes, the engineering expertise. You just can't replicate that quickly, or maybe ever.
Right.
They've got more than a decade's lead in EUV. They basically invented it over something like 17 years of development.
17 years.
Yeah, so they're the only supplier of EUV systems globally, 100% market share there. And overall, in lithography, they have something like 90%.
Wow.
And it's reinforced by this unique R&D ecosystem they've built. Key partners like Carl Zeiss in Germany for the optics, these giant perfect mirrors.
The mirrors have to be perfect, I imagine.
Flawless,
Yeah.
essentially. And TRUMPF for the specialized lasers. These aren't just suppliers, they're deep partners. A competitor would have to recreate that whole exclusive supply chain. Good luck with that.
Okay, so that's the tech side. What about the customers? Why can't they just switch?
Because the switching costs are just brutal. Existential, really, for the big guys like TSMC, Samsung, Intel.
Existential.
Yeah. I mean, these cutting-edge factories, these fabs, they cost billions and billions of dollars. And they are designed, literally built around ASML's machines.
Ah, so you can't just swap one out.
No way! You'd have to redesign and rebuild the most critical, most expensive part of your multi-billion-dollar factory. It's unthinkable. And it's not just the hardware. Thousands of engineers at the customer sites are trained for years specifically on ASML's gear, their software, plus downtime is disaster. If one of these machines goes down unexpectedly, it can cost the fab millions every single day.
Millions a day.
Yeah, so reliability is everything. They just can't risk switching.
Right, that Intel example you mentioned.
Yeah.
That sounds like a perfect case study. Can you walk us through that again? It really hits home how locked in customers are.
Absolutely. It's a classic cautionary tale. So Intel, they were actually an early investor in ASML's EUV research. They put money in.
So they knew it was important.
You'd think, but for various reasons, they delayed actually adopting the first generation of EUV machines when they became available. They hesitated.
Oh.
Meanwhile, their main rival, TSMC, they went all in, adopted EUV aggressively, invested heavily, and they used that technological edge to just surge ahead in making the most advanced chips.
And Intel got left behind.
Big time. They fell significantly behind now. They're spending tens of billions desperately trying to catch up. They've even committed publicly to being the very first customer for ASML's next generation, the high-NA EUV.
So even Intel, with all their money and engineers.
Exactly. Even Intel has no other real choice. They have to buy from ASML to compete at the high end. The risk of falling further behind is just too massive.
So this incredible moat,
Mm-hmm.
is it just sitting there or is it actually getting stronger? What's the direction?
All the signs point to it actively widening, which is pretty rare in tech, right? Things usually get disrupted.
Yeah, usually someone comes along.
But here, look at their R&D spending. It went from, 2.2 billion euros in 2020 to 4.3 billion in 2024.
Doubled in 4 years.
Pretty much. That spending just dwarfs anyone else. It widens the technology gap. And the machines themselves get more complex. Going from DUV to EUV was a huge jump. Now going to high-NA EUV, these machines costing over 370 million euros. That raises the barrier even higher and locks customers in even tighter.
Makes sense. And then there's this data flywheel effect. They have over 5,500 machines out there in the field.
Wow.
And incredibly, like 95% of them are still running. They collect tons of operational data from all these machines. They use machine learning to constantly optimize performance, predict maintenance. So the more machines they have, the smarter they get. Exactly. More data means better performance, which helps sell more machines, which generates even more data. It's a virtuous cycle.
A feedback loop.
A powerful, self-reinforcing one. A new competitor. They have zero installed base, zero data. How can they possibly catch up? It leaves rivals like Canon and Nikon stuck competing in the older DUV market. It's almost impossible for a new player to break into the leading edge now. That data advantage is fascinating. Okay, let's try and get a feel for the relationships. Being at the absolute center of this global industry, what's it like on the ground? What do customers say? What about employees?
Well, the customer relationship, it's intense. It's not just a transaction. It's what you might call critical symbiosis.
Symbiosis, mutual dependence.
Deep mutual necessity.
Yeah.
The big chip makers, Intel, TSMC, Samsung, they aren't just customers. They're active partners. They're co-investors. Remember that 2012 investment? They put over €1 billion into ASML's R&D.
Right, to speed up EUV. because they needed it.
They absolutely needed it for their own future. That tells you everything. The dependency is just huge. TSMC alone is about 40% of ASML's revenue.
40% from one customer.
Yep. And in early 2025, South Korea Samsung and SK Hynix was their biggest market, also around 40%.
So heavily concentrated.
Very. And ASML is physically embedded with them. They have something like 10,000 customer support staff. Many of them work permanently inside the customer's fabs.
10,000 stationed at the customer site.
To keep those multi-million-dollar machines running 24/7, it's an incredibly tight integration.
Wow, that's way beyond just being a supplier.
Oh, yeah. And if you look online, like on Reddit forums where engineers talk, ASML is always described as the only supplier, irreplaceable. People say the fabs are literally designed around ASML's specs.
Okay, so customers see them as indispensable partners. What about the people working at ASML? What's the vibe?
It's interesting, if you look at reviews, say on Glassdoor, you see a consistent picture with positives and negatives.
Like most companies?
Right, the positives. People love working on the absolute cutting edge of technology. Technical excellence, really high quality standards, smart colleagues, good benefits, job security seems strong, long careers are common, lots of people stay 20 years or more.
Sounds like a solid engineering culture. What are the downsides people mention?
The main criticism you hear is bureaucratic, process heavy, maybe slow decision-making sometimes, lots of paperwork, maybe challenges sharing knowledge across big teams.
The classic big company stuff.
Kind of, but here's the interesting part. You could argue that bureaucracy is actually a feature, not a bug, for ASML.
How so?
Well, think about it. They're building these machines the size of a small house, weighing 180 tons, costing hundreds of millions of euros.
Right, where a single day of failure costs millions.
Yep. Exactly. In that context, you need extreme rigor. You need meticulous quality control, documentation, strict processes, careful validation. That methodical approach, that bureaucracy, is actually essential for the reliability and trust that their entire business model depends on.
That's a really smart way to look at it. The slowness is actually about precision and safety.
Precisely. It's necessary discipline.
Okay, so given this incredibly complex, high-stakes business, what about the leadership? Who's been steering the ship and what's their approach?
The leadership story at ASML is really one of remarkable consistency and very long-term thinking. It aligns perfectly with their business model. Peter Wennink was CEO from 2013 until just recently, 2024.
Right, he oversaw that whole crucial EUV ramp-up.
Exactly. He guided them through that critical phase. His whole philosophy was about thinking systemically, collaborating deeply with the industry, and being willing to make these huge multi-decade bets on technology.
Takes guts.
It really does.
Yeah.
And his successor, Christophe Fouquet, seems like perfect continuity. He's been at ASML for over 15 years, actually led the EUV division before becoming CEO.
So he knows it inside out.
Absolutely. And he talks the same language. He's quoted saying something like, EUV success was never the goal our customers were.
Interesting focus.
Yeah, it emphasizes humility, the importance of those partnerships, like with Zeiss and TRUMPF, constantly reinvesting in R&D, even when times are tougher, and focusing on making the tech work economically for the customers, reducing their costs.
That sounds like real long-term stewardship, not just focused on the next quarter.
Exactly. It's about enabling the whole semiconductor roadmap, knowing that if the industry thrives, ASML thrives.
Okay, so that's the leadership philosophy. How does it translate into where the money goes? This business must generate enormous amounts of cash. How do they allocate it?
They do generate a ton of cash, and their approach to using it is seen as very disciplined, very rational. Morningstar gives them their top exemplary rating for capital allocation.
I praise.
It is. And their strategy is pretty clear, kind of hierarchical, top priority, always reinvesting back into the core business.
Feeding the beast.
Exactly. Widening that moat. So R&D, like we said, soared to 4.3 billion euros in 2024. That's maybe 15% of their revenue going right back into innovation to stay ahead.
Wow.
And CapEx too, building factories to make the next generation of tools. That was about 2.2 billion, trailing 12 months.
Okay, so reinvestment first. What's next?
Second, they do strategic acquisitions, but they're very targeted. Surgical, really?
Not just buying random companies.
No, it's all about securing their supply chain, controlling critical technologies, de-risking things. Like back in 2013, they bought Cymer for almost 2 billion euros.
Why Cymer?
Cymer made the specialized light source for EUV. That was a potential bottleneck, so ASML bought them to get direct controls.
Smart.
Very. Then in 2017, they took a big stake, about 25%, in Carl Zeiss SMT, the optics guys, for €1 billion. And in 2020, they bought Berliner Glas Group for other critical optical parts. It's all logical moat building.
Makes sense. So after reinvesting in strategic buys, what's left?
Then, and only then, they return cash to shareholders. Dividends and buybacks.
Standard practice, but how do they approach it?
Consistently. They pay a growing quarterly dividend. It was over €6 per share in 2024. But the payout ratio is conservative, maybe 20-40% of net income. They're not stretching themselves.
Right.
They do substantial share buybacks systematically. They had a €12 billion program running for 2022-2025. In just 2021 and 2022, they bought back over €13 billion worth of stock.
So significant returns to shareholders, too.
Definitely. It feels like a very rational, long-term, shareholder-friendly framework. And that customer co-investment back in 2012, just a brilliant move to share the risk of developing EUV.
Okay, that paints a picture of a really well-managed, disciplined company.
Yeah.
How does it all look in the actual financial results? How strong are the numbers? What jumps out?
Well, all those qualitative strengths, the moat, the management, they absolutely show up in the financials. ASML is just exceptionally profitable and remarkably consistent, especially for being in the semiconductor equipment space, which can be very cyclical.
More consistent than you expect.
Much more. Revenue has grown at about 15% per year on average for 2 decades. 2 decades. And they only had 3 years in that whole stretch where revenue actually went down.
That's incredible for that industry.
It really is. Net income exploded from around €1.4 billion in 2015 to over $7.5 billion in 2024.
Wow. And margins. With that kind of dominance.
Exactly. The pricing power is immense. Gross margins are consistently around 51%. Operating margins are typically in the 30-35% range.
35% operating margin for making huge machines.
It's extraordinary. It speaks volumes about their monopoly position. And the quality ratios are just fantastic. Return on invested capital, ROIC, usually somewhere between 24% and 43% recently. Way above their cost of capital.
So creating a lot of value.
Tons. And they're a cash machine. Free cash flow often converts at more than 100% of net income, like 120% in 2024, 128% in 2022. They generate more cash than their reported profit sometimes.
Okay. And the balance sheet. Debt.
Rock solid. A fortress. They have about €13.2 billion in cash, give or take, against only €5.2 billion in total debt.
So a huge net cash position.
Yeah, almost €8 billion net cash. Debt to equity is super low, like 0.27. If you look at their financials over the last 10 years, it's just strong, consistent growth pretty much everywhere that matters. Revenue, profit, R&D, cash flow. Very robust.
Okay, so you've painted this picture of an incredibly dominant, well-run, financially strong, critical company. It sounds almost perfect. Which brings us to the price. How do you value something like this? Is it possible to pay too much, even for a gem like ASML?
That is the crucial question, isn't it? And yeah, the market knows ASML is special. The valuation definitely reflects that premium status right now, mid-2025.
So what are the multiples looking like?
Well, the trailing PE ratio, price to earnings, is somewhere in the 31 to 34 range. Forward PE, looking ahead, maybe 24 to 30. Price to free cash flow is around 28 to 32.
Which is high, low. Compared to its history?
Compared to its recent history, it's actually not at the high end. The 5-year average PE was closer to 40 or 43 times. So 30-ish is actually toward the lower end of its range over the last few years.
Interesting. So maybe not as expensive as it has been.
Potentially. Look, on an absolute basis, a PE over 30 isn't objectively cheap. But you have to ask, what are you buying?
Right, not just any company.
You're buying a near monopoly on absolutely critical technology. You're buying fortress financials. You're buying very durable growth. A premium is arguably warranted. Maybe the current price reflects some worries about the semiconductor cycle or geopolitics.
Giving a slightly better entry point.
Possibly. A more reasonable one than we've seen in a while. You're not buying a commodity maker here. You're buying that critical choke point. And maybe the durability of its earnings, because customers have to buy, justifies a valuation that looks rich compared to a normal industrial company.
That makes sense. It's a unique asset.
Yeah.
Okay, looking forward then. What's the main thing that's going to drive ASML's growth from here? And on the flip side, what are the real serious threats, the things that could actually break this amazing story?
The single biggest growth engine, hands down, is the industry moving to high-NA EUV, that next generation of machines.
The €370 million ones?
Yep. Those are essential for making chips below the 2-nanometer node. Think the absolute future of AI chips, supercomputing, advanced data centers.
Stuff we haven't even imagined yet.
Probably. And the economics for ASML are fantastic. These machines are way more complex, way more expensive, so each sale means a huge jump in revenue and profit per system.
And customers are already lining up.
Intel got the first R&D system. They're designing their future products around it for 2025 and beyond. TSMC, Samsung, they'll follow. They have to.
Okay, so High-NA is the big driver. What about the dangers? What keeps ASML awake at night?
Number one risk, and it's significant, is geopolitics and export controls.
Ah, the China issue.
Primarily, yes. ASML is right in the middle of the U.S.-China tech tensions. U.S.-led rules already restrict selling the most advanced EUV machines to China.
But China's a big market for them, right? You said 41% in 2024?
Huge market, yeah, mostly for the older DUV machines currently. But if those restrictions tighten further, or if there's a major conflict, that could permanently cut off a massive chunk of their potential market. And that's mostly outside of ASML's control.
A big external risk. What else?
Second, and this is more remote maybe, is disruptive technology. What if someone invents a completely new way to pattern chips that doesn't use lithography?
Like something out of science fiction.
Kind of. People have tried things like nano-imprint lithography, but so far, nothing has proven viable for the kind of high-volume, high-yield manufacturing the industry needs. Even the new transistor designs people are working on, like GAFET or CFET.
More jargon?
Yeah, basically new ways to build the tiny switches on chips. Even those still need lithography at their foundation. So the chance of ASML's core tech becoming obsolete in the next 10 years seems low, but if it happened, catastrophic.
Right, low probability, high impact. Anything else?
Just the flip side of their key customer relationships. Extreme customer concentration.
Having TSMC, Samsung, Intel be so dominant is also a risk.
It is, potentially. It's a strength now because those relationships are deep. But what if one of them has a major strategic stumble? Or a massive financial crisis? Or what if, hypothetically, two of them merged? Any major disruption to one of those few key customers would hit ASML incredibly hard.
Okay, that makes sense. So thinking about all this, how does the market generally see ASML? What's the consensus view? And based on our dive, what's maybe a contrarian take we could offer?
Yeah, the market consensus is pretty clear. Everyone agrees ASML is a fantastic, high-quality company. Powerful monopoly, great tech.
Right.
But it's still viewed mainly as a capital equipment supplier. And that industry is famously cyclical, right? Boom and bust with semiconductor demand.
Right, the chip cycle.
So the market focuses a lot on short-term stuff. Quarterly bookings, revenue guidance. The stock is seen as expensive and vulnerable if the economy slows down or if there are bad geopolitical headlines. The common analogy is they sell the picks and shovels during the tech gold rush.
Okay, that's the consensus. What's the different angle?
Our potential contrarian insight is that the market might be fundamentally misjudging the nature of the demand for ASML's most advanced tools.
Oh, so?
For customers like TSMC, Samsung, Intel, buying that next-generation high-NA EUV machine, it's not really a cyclical, discretionary capital expense they can cut back if times get tough.
You're saying it's different from buying, say, a new truck or office building?
Completely different. It's an existential, non-discretionary R&D investment. They have to buy these tools to stay on their technology roadmap. If they don't, they fall behind competitors permanently, like we saw with Intel.
Ah, so the demand is much less cyclical than the market thinks.
Arguably, yes. Much more durable. The market calls them picks and shovels. Maybe a better analogy is ASML is the sole source architect of the gold mine itself. You need them to even access the next richer vein of gold.
The architect of the mine. I like that.
And if that's true, if the demand is that durable, that non-discretionary, then maybe that sustained premium valuation is actually justified even through cycles.
That's a powerful counterpoint to the standard view. What an incredible journey into this company. We've hit the business, the massive moat, the leadership, the financials. Really got a handle on why ASML is such a unique and critical player.
It's definitely a fascinating case study. But maybe, to wrap things up, we should throw out one more thought. A challenge, really. Something that pushes back against that strong bull case we've built.
Okay, hit me with the red team challenge. What's the potential flaw?
Let's flip that main growth driver on its head. What if high-NA EUV turns out to be an economic dead end?
Whoa, how could that happen?
What if the sheer cost over $370 million a machine and the complexity there are new challenges, like it prints on a smaller area at once, called half-field imaging, which adds steps. And they need new, much trickier photoresist chemicals. What if all that makes it just too expensive? So expensive that it actually breaks the economic model of Moore's Law for the chip makers.
Ooh, technically amazing, but just doesn't make financial sense to use.
Exactly. Consider this. Maybe chip makers like TSMC find it's cheaper to just keep using their current, already paid for EUV machines for longer. Maybe they can squeeze more life out of them with clever tricks like multi-patterning for way longer than anyone expects right now.
Extending the current tech instead of buying the super expensive new stuff.
Right. And what if those new transistor designs we mentioned, the ones that stack vertically like CFET, what if they genuinely shift the focus? Maybe the bottleneck becomes less about printing finer lines, horizontally lithography, and more about depositing materials perfectly and etching vertically.
So less reliance on ASML's absolute cutting edge.
Potentially. In that kind of scenario, ASML's main growth engine, High-NA, could just sputter. Revenue stagnates, margins may become under pressure, and that premium valuation, it could collapse pretty painfully.
You'd have bought a technological marvel that turned into an economic white elephant.
Precisely. Paying a premium price for something whose core market didn't develop as expected because the economics just didn't work out for the customers.
That is definitely a powerful counterargument and something really important for you, the listener, to chew on.
Wow. Well, hopefully this deep dive, really digging into that analysis, has given you a shortcut to getting informed on ASML and maybe sparked a few of those aha moments.
Hope so.
Until next time on the deep dive, keep exploring, keep questioning,